So thank you again for joining us for Black Excellence across the industries. Today is really designed to share a multitude of different spaces to which Black workers occupy space in industries, from, as we've heard, health, legal services, community activism, ownership and entrepreneurship, media, and so much more. We'll hear a little bit more from Brian once he joins us, from construction services and engineering as well. I really wanted to take the time and collective space to thank you all for being here today, but really just to share this notion of talking about some of the challenges that we may all face, but really taking a time out to share our accomplishments and give acknowledgement and space for students who may be aspiring in spaces that you all are now. So 2019 was the year of survival or glow up, from a global pandemic to the mass visual killings of individuals like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and that's just to name a few that were televised. While many of us in this room have always known about the cost or compounding intersectional oppressions of being Black in America, I'm going to open this up to our panelists now and I'm going to ask you, in what ways have you used your voice or your work in the past year to advance Black voices, particularly? I'll start off with Milo in media.
I just said in a podcast last night with two pretty prominent Black leaders in the community here in San Diego, Lance Grove, who's a 1031 exchange lawyer and deals in essentially operating tax breaks for real estate purchase, and Courtney Hendo, who's a videographer and cinematographer who owns a couple of studios here in town. We were supposed to do an hour-long podcast. It ended up being about 2 hours because the topic of conversation started off as exactly what you've just directed. It's incredible to hear other people's stories of adversity. I have a kind of a unique position since I'm actually not from the United States, I'm from the UK. So when I came here, I had a preconceived notion of how the United States would be, how it treats its people, what it's passionate about as a whole, but nothing could have really prepared me for kind of the dull, gray reality of just how things can be here. For me, as an advocate of people of color where I'm from and here too, how I've been able to use my voice in the media space has been twofold. First of all, like I mentioned earlier on, the most important thing for me is to, and I think for any business, is to explore as many different diversities as possible as an employer. I think that, similar to any organization, the quality and ability of any business is predicated by its success in speaking many languages and being able to communicate across multiple different boundaries and in multiple different ways. And sometimes the only way to do that is to rely on people that speak those languages first. And I'm not necessarily talking about even different dialects. I'm just talking about, the language of different backgrounds and different understandings. I think that probably the first thing that all entrepreneurs do when they get started is they think that my business is going to be big enough to take on the world and cater and satisfy anybody and everybody. Keeping that mindset when you're fostering conversations about who's going to help your company build and grow from a sweat equity standpoint, from an investment standpoint, from an employer-employee standpoint is vital. So my twofold ways are this. I speak with and I try to employ people of any and all demographics, and I am kind of unashamed to say that I am vehemently oriented towards having a company of color. I want my company to be a melting pot. I want to see different faces. I want to hear different languages. I want to hear different backgrounds. I want to hear the perceptibly wealthy speak to the perceptibly not so wealthy. I want to hear Black voices, white voices, candy stripe voices. I don't care. I want that. Because I think that there's strength there. And that's something that I learned from the UK, which just in terms of society may be, although it's as diverse as the US, may be a little more integrated. And then in the second way, of course, we deal in the conversion of hundreds of thousands of data points a day. because there's no point in running advertising and marketing if you can't get eyes on what your message is. We try to make sure that we work with clients, no matter what the dollar amount is that comes through the door, who have a fair and balanced and unbiased message. I'm very discriminatory in that way. That's my right and my privilege to do so as a business owner. And if you perceive that one of the tenets of American success is free speech, if there are people out there in the world who can be vehemently opposed to integration, then there are people who can be vehemently opposed to anybody who's against integration. I am one of those people. So I only take clients and only work with clients whose messages are fair and balanced. And we try to make sure as well, especially in the content space, when we're creating content and we are seeing faces and hearing voices, that we have a wide spread of people who present marketable messages. We noticed terrifyingly when we were building this company that there are a lot of full service ad agencies that have social genre. They only do, just to place this one, they'll only do ads for white people or do ads for black people. That for me is an incredibly negative piece of brand perception. So to answer the question in two ways, I like to offer opportunities to people of any background, color, creed, race, sexuality, and then the messages that we spread, we try to keep fair, equitable, and if need be, and there has to be an issue of race or politics, we try to be incisive and stick as thoroughly to the facts as possible.
Awesome. So I'm hearing some real intentionality on making sure that media remains intersectional and that all voices are heard. That's amazing. Genevieve, I'm going to toss this question to you. Knowing some of the spaces and places you've been in the last year, how have you used your voice for the power of amplifying Black voices?
I'm going to stay off camera just for a second. I'm not trying to be rude. Hopefully I can get on camera within the next 10 minutes. So please enjoy my profile picture. So as an attorney, thank you very much for your understanding. As an attorney, and particularly as a criminal defense attorney, there has been a need for me to raise my voice in many different ways across timelines. What I would say is probably the most elevated way that I raised my voice was when I ran for district attorney for San Diego County. As a public defender for 13 years in San Diego County, it was very clear who the criminal legal system targeted mostly: people of color, poor people, and people who are experiencing homelessness. And so as a public defender, most of those people from those groups would be my clients that I would represent. Sorry, Sasha, is it hard to hear?
We're still okay.
Okay, I thought you were saying something. And so seeing who my clients were overwhelmingly pushed me to advocate on behalf of those groups, not just in the courtroom, but also outside of the courtroom and coalition work. But when I ran for district attorney for San Diego County, I put together a platform that made those very vulnerable and impacted groups visible. And it was very important for me, especially as a Black attorney, to talk about the disproportionate rate in which our Black youth, our Black men and women are arrested and engaged with the criminal legal system and also be prosecuted, of course. It's really important for me as a Black attorney to not just point out the inequities in our criminal legal system, but also to offer solutions. And so I've used my voice to do that. And through that race, I was able to really diagnose the problems in our county's criminal legal system, which I believe is a lack of care, compassion, and concern, where people are reduced to statistics and numbers for conviction. They're not seen as people. The work that I continue to do through my organization and also through coalitions like the Coalition for Police Accountability and transparency really is the work of trying to reimagine public safety, having a different lens on what it means for our community to be safe, even from the officers who wear badges. And one critical thing that I like to stress is that we can go to numbers around who is incarcerated the most in California, which are Black men, but also understanding that it doesn't start in the courtroom. It starts with racial profiling. It starts with over-policing of certain communities and neighborhoods. And that's how I've been able to use my voice and how I continue to use my voice.
Amazing. So I'm hearing not only holding individuals accountable, but some system changes, right? Recommending inner workings that will change for the greater good. Amazing, amazing. Tyrone, I'm going to pass this to you now. As an entrepreneur, former basketball player, community activist, and worker, what are some things that you've done in the last year to amplify some voices?
Mine is basically just definitely educating both sides, non-Black and, African Americans, everybody else that, look like me, of educating them on dealing with law enforcement and breaking stereotypes that, people who do not look like me have because of media. It's a lot of stuff that goes on in media where the media project us as one thing, and we're not educated. So it's just being real with people, let them know that we are educated. We're different from what the media is telling us. Because working at Horizon Christian, it was predominantly a white school, affluent families. And so in speaking with the ones who were calling me, they were like, what is going on? 2020 was a horrific year, but 2020 was a year to educate a lot of people because they could listen. In the hustle and the bustle of everyday life, people do not listen because they're so concerned with what they're doing. And it's a selfish type of thing that we have, going on in our lives instead of being selfless and trying to make the world better. So a lot of people were calling me. It was like, how is this happening? Being a victim of police violence and brutality in Atlanta, it was a natural thing to me. This is what happens. So now that people are hearing, I can use my voice. This has been happening. This has been happening forever since we've been brought over here. And people didn't realize that. Now we have a lot of people ready to hear and fight for us. Now it's to educate them who we are. Professionally, it's like just serving people and let them know that this is not a regular place where you come for us as a restaurant. We're here to listen to people, to pour into people. We're giving back to the community daily. Where people don't even know. We're the type of business where we don't care what color you are. If you're struggling, we're going to come alongside you and help you out in whatever kind of way we can. We definitely target our community in Southeast San Diego. We definitely target that community to see what we can do, because that's why I attend church at, and I have a lot of families that need help that attend the church I go to. So, and I talk to the pastor daily about what we can do to help as a business, because, too much is given, much is required. So we're trying to give as much as we can back to the community and just let people know that stereotype that they have over that people look like me, that it's not correct. Make judgments for yourself, not for what the media is telling you or someone else is telling you. So we're just trying to educate people on who we are as a people, and because we are great people that have accomplished so much through so much adversity, and people don't see that and until we tell them that, and then we have an ear now. So it's just educating people.
Knowledge is certainly power. Dr. Abdi, I'm going to pass this on to you to round this out. What are some things that you've done within the last year?
Hi. Over the past year for me, as I said, like I'm in a small town called Peoria, Illinois, and in my residency program, we are probably less than 5% of us that are Black physicians, and the population in Peoria probably has like around 30% of Black folks. And so since the situation with George Floyd and so on, we were trying to we formed a small group where we were trying to see ways where we can bring more physicians down here into our program and suggest that, at least make those sort of suggestions to our program. So that's something we've been trying to work on, and yeah, so that they can recruit more physicians that can eventually take care of much of the Black folks, the Black patients that we have here. So they're not neglected, and so they're not thrown under the bus of biases. So that's something we've been certainly working on, and also trying to make like recruit recommendations of folks that I know personally, and trying to see if they can come down here. Those are the main things that we've been doing out here.
Thank you for that. And that jumps into actually to our next question. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Abdi. In many of the fields that you all represent today, there's not a lot of representation of Black workers, particularly in the health industry. Do you often, what is your biggest obstacle knowing that you are one of very few in the room, and what are some ways that you can pass on to students to help with some of those obstacles?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of obstacles, especially when you're a minority in any group, right? In medicine, that obstacle would certainly be just like, you're providing for a whole lot of patients, right? And for example, I live in Peoria, and there's a big population of Black patients that are that we see down here, and people of the same connect with each other a lot better, right? So especially like in the clinic I go to sometimes, what I try to do is like, there's the patients are divided in like, but a good like 30% of those patients are Black, and I try to help those patients, and I know I can connect with them a lot better than any other folk would be able to. So personally, on a personal level, to me, it's like, how can I help these patients specifically, and try to do things that can improve their life. I'm sure they trust me a lot better than other folks, and we connect on a much more closer level than other folks would. So my thing is like, when you come in a field, any type of field, it's about how you can really improve the lives of the people, the minorities of Black folks. And so for me, yes, certainly connecting with them on that level, and trying to see what I can do from my standpoint. I'm not sure if that answered the question.
That absolutely answered the question. Yeah. Using yourself as an actual catalyst to create that change. Absolutely. Milo, I'm going to pass it to you. You're certainly in an industry where representation is sometimes lopsided, right? In your specific role, you're not the majority. And a lot of the figures that we may see in media and representation of Black individuals may look different. So what obstacles do you face, and how would you help students overcome them?
All right, what I'm doing right now is I'm going to put it in the chat. One of my associates, Lance Groth, who I mentioned, I talked about earlier on, is hosting an event this Saturday to support Black-owned businesses, vintage sale event. And it occurred to me that it would be a great place to share that here. So I'm going to put that in the chat. So you guys, there's a lot of Black business owners here. I want to give you guys an opportunity to plug into a network, the Black San Diego, the business empowerment movement. Their event's on Saturday. I'll drop that link in the chat, and it would be great to see as many of you there as possible. It just occurred to me. So in doing so, I've completely forgotten what the question is. So I'm gonna, okay. Yeah, Sasha, the question is, how are we using our voices? Can you remind me the question?
The question is, in a field that you are often not overly represented, what obstacles do you have, and what solutions, or how do you mitigate those obstacles, and what ways can we empower our students to do the same?
Okay, so to speak very bluntly, it's the rest of the world, I think, understands like the immense amount of disenfranchisement that exists in Black communities in the United States, and it seems to the rest of the world like what Black people are given in the United States is sports and entertainment. I'm a huge cliche. I'm absolutely no exception to that rule. I played college basketball, same as Tyrone. Had a great time with that. Got some great qualifications out of it, and have some qualifications in entertainment as well through film school. So for me, I very much am the walking, talking cliche. So in my field, I don't actually feel like Black communities are underrepresented, but what I feel like they are is undereducated. I'm going to keep circling back around to this podcast I did last night, and the reason for that is this: the conversation that I was having with the two business owners constantly circled back to education, especially in the format of financial literacy. It is impossible for my company to operate without creative minds at the helm. We can sit there, run data and analytics, and design marketing targeting campaigns without content all day long. But if we're not making something pretty, largely speaking, nobody cares about the brand, right? So in my field, in the creative side of my field, I think that Black people are largely overrepresented, and I love that. But I feel like they're not given the knowledge base and the financial literacy to understand exactly how the marketplace works, how fickle it can be, and what to do with the first dollar that you do make to make it two. So for me, as I mentioned, I like to stay as broad and wide open in my hiring process. But for me, at every single level, it's about information. It's genuinely my belief that aside from time, the most valuable currency on the face of the planet is knowledge. The more of it that we can amass and the more of it that we can spread throughout the population and indeed our communities and cultures, the better we do. From the outside looking in as a foreign national, it seems like there's a ton of information that's not being shared to the relative communities or the relevant communities. So I try to stay as frank and open and honest with people, sometimes to the point where, sometimes it's a little maybe uncomfortable for them. Like, if somebody comes to me and asks me for a kind of a critique on an establishing or an emerging business, I'm going to give you my direct, like, if I think you're messing up the money, I'm going to tell you that you're messing up the money. And I'm not only going to do that then, but I'm going to try and sit you down with some people who understand infinitely better than I do, so that I can just remain a lens for communication on how people can improve their standing and do better. And here's why: because I genuinely believe that in communities of color, specifically the Black community, there is immense resilience, the capacity for incredible creative feat, but more than that, I genuinely believe a capacity for greater learning that surpasses, because of the history of Black people and their resilience, that surpasses a lot of other cultures. I have seen nothing but success stories for young Black business owners and Black business owners indeed across all age ranges, nothing but success once they get their X's and O's figured out surrounding knowledge of their industry and financial literacy, be that relevant to their industry or not. So my contributing factor in the business space, and we work a lot with some decent sized clients here in San Diego. One of the biggest mortgage banks nationwide is headquartered here. We work with them, a couple of escrow companies in the real estate space. As a company, we have a really rock solid handle on the financial landscape and what knowledges we need to be putting forward for people to start businesses and make sure that they're financially healthy. So that's where I try and do the most of my work in terms of education and in terms of speaking to people who are largely disenfranchised and having them understand whether or not you feel like the opportunities are there. The game plan is such that you can engage in filing the same pieces of paperwork and engaging in the same conversations. And again, the conversation I just had with my associate Lance Groth last night went along the lines of this. As a Black business owner, he deals in a space that archetypally and being very direct, we've seen as being not available for marginalized communities. He literally finds tax breaks for people who invest in real estate. He puts people in a position where they can have an eye-to-eye conversation with Uncle Sam about how best to look after their finances. I think that that's of key importance. It's about knowledge, and it's about building financial literacy to provide opportunities for disenfranchised people, people of color, and people who, honest to goodness, just don't feel like they have the same opportunities as anybody else. I fight that. That's where my mindset is actually.
Yeah, which is really powerful in essence, because it's making the playing field a lot more even and a lot more level. Thank you for that. Tyrone, you opened a business during a pandemic. During the pandemic. You cannot tell me that there was no obstacles that you did not face. You will have to manually unmute. Okay, perfect. You can't tell me that there was no obstacles that you didn't face, especially being a very limited Black owner in San Diego. So spill the beat.
The unique thing about us is that I worked at a high school. And so we built a lot of clientele before I even had a business. And being the dean of students over there, I had a lot of interaction with the parents, not just the students over at Horizon. And being the head coach, you know, you meet people from the neighborhood, you know, just from the community. So we had a great connection with a lot of people from different areas, all the way Palm Springs, all the way to Temecula, even LA County. So the obstacle of me opening a business was not really a tough one, as far as, you know, getting the clientele and getting the customers. The obstacle for me was having people take me seriously, that I was opening a business, because how can a basketball coach go from, you know, being a dean of students to being a owner? How can I take him seriously? And so what we did, we started off with our catering first, and then we acquired this last February, the brick and mortar. And just getting through the pandemic was our toughest thing. But, you know, the churches around the community helped us a whole lot, you know, by having events and, you know, using our services. So that was a great thing. And, you know, I'm not sure, a lot of people don't know, we started our business 3 years ago with $100 to get it off the ground, you know. And so that $100 has turned into, you know, this brick and mortar, by just people starting to believe in us and coming alongside us to help us, you know, not go through as many obstacles as a regular, you know, restaurant business owner would go through. So, you know, I think it was just being taken seriously by the people around me, by my community, by the public, and people who already knew me, was probably our biggest obstacle, you know, because starting something with $100, you don't really look for a lot of finances. So we were just crawling. We crawled our way into this until we learned how to walk. And now we're in that process of learning how to take one step at a time to be a better community leader, to be a better business. So, you know, the biggest obstacle was just being taken seriously by everybody.
I have a question. You're in a field of work that scares the crap out of me, because there's in my space, there's definitely right and wrong, but in your space, there's for sure good food and not good food.
Yes.
So I'm always interested to hear about business owners in your space, because it's like you got way more bravery than me. But my question is this: is you were talking about people found it difficult to take you seriously. One of the biggest frustrations that I have is when I speak to people about what I do, being categorized in a certain way because of what people's perception of race is, right? So, and I think maybe the same as you, when I got into this space, which is, you know, for the most part, like a very kind of like data-driven and strategy-driven space, and I was telling people, I'm an advertiser, I'm a marketer, people would just be like, okay, so you're a mixed race person or a person of color, and they're very creative, so you just basically make video, that's what you do. Okay. And that wasn't even anywhere near the core of the thing. My question is, how much of that struggle for people to validate or understand what you do you think was rooted in you being a former basketball player, or rooted in you being a Black man? Was it more to do with like athletes can't do business, we know how that goes, or was it more to do with Black people can't own businesses, we know how that goes? What did it feel like?
I think it was more of me being a Black man coming from one industry, jumping into one of the hardest industries in the world, you know, to be a owner of a restaurant, you know. So I think it was definitely just me jumping from being a coach, you know, because I've experienced racism to it utmost in Atlanta, growing up in Atlanta, where we couldn't go on certain sides of the city. And if we did go on that side of the city, then it was going to be trouble. California is so kicked back to me. I know it's, people who don't like people who look like me, but I can kind of feel that out when I'm talking to them now. It's a kind of discernment that was instilled in me from growing up. So I'm able to tell. I think it was more people thinking, he's just a coach. And he don't know anything about how to do this and how to earn and build equity and run a business. But Milo, we've learned a lot being basketball players. Basketball is related to life, especially when you're out there playing on the court. It's a one-on-one game, but it's a team thing. And it's all about the team with me to help and be honest. The team has been honest with me. When something's not good, they'll throw that away. So that's been the biggest thing with me. And people taking me serious because I surrounded myself with people that are smarter than me. I'm stubborn in my ways, but I surrounded myself with people that's smarter than me, and they're able to tell me the truth, and I'm able to take it and listen, to them and apply in the way that I need to.
Same as I think that's a big part of leadership that's often overlooked. It's good to hear you say that. This is the thing I always say. I brag my company up to anybody I talk to, but I always start with this: is like I am one person, and there are I don't even know how many employees we have right now, but I am one person. I am surrounded. I'm perpetually the least talented, least intelligent person in the room. Yeah. Sometimes that's a very valuable element of leadership. It's just being a lens and a focus for broader greatness. I really think that my role is, I don't think that I'm, by a long stretch of the imagination, not the smartest data scientist at my company. That's not even a conversation. I think I'm a pretty good creator. I'm okay at that. But I really think my main strength is I just talk a lot and introduce people to each other. It's really where I'm at. It's just different leadership stuff. So it's really cool to hear you say that as well as a peer of mine there. So, and thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you both. So Genevieve, I'm going to kick this off to you and spotlight your video here now that we can see your shiny face again. We know that being a Black woman particularly has compounding impressions from both race and a gender standpoint, but you're in an industry that is heavily underrepresented from any Black worker. Can you tell me any firsthand account obstacles that you faced and how students can overcome those obstacles in the future?
Yeah, so lots of obstacles, none that can't be overcome, none that haven't been overcome, but there is definitely a challenge with sometimes being the only person that looks like you in the room and having someone assume because of what you look like that you're not actually the attorney on the case, that you may just be the client. I've had judges look at my white male intern for an answer when I am right there in chambers next to this person as the attorney and having to correct the judge. I've had experiences at a major law firm where they had an issue with me wearing my natural hair in braids. And there's just so many of these examples that I can give. I think the biggest example for me as an obstacle, which is a systemic one, is again, not seeing a lot of me in even the public defender's office, how to find that mentor, how to best represent a client when you identify with the client and you know that the judge that you're going to be in front of isn't necessarily going to look like you or have the ability to sort of empathize or to see that person as a human. Those were some of the biggest obstacles for me in the legal industry, because as a person who comes from Southeast San Diego, who's seen the over-policing and the underserved aspects of certain communities that I grew up in, was raised in, still live in now, bringing that lens to the work and understanding that other people didn't have that same experience, so they couldn't necessarily see where I was coming from in my advocacy. But through those obstacles, it really pushed me to be a part of the solutions in creating a pipeline of diversity, a pipeline so that there would be more Black women in particular, but especially women and women of color to come behind me and join in this fantastic profession of being an advocate, being an attorney. And so I just finished a term on the State Bar of California's Council on Access and Fairness, where we looked at not just statistics, but we looked at the real data showing the hurdles for Black attorneys. I think some of you may or may not be surprised to hear that Black attorneys are the targets of the most complaints that the State Bar of California receives, founded or not. There's obviously issues with the test that we use, the bar exam for one. So we would look to how can we increase the passage rate for attorneys who historically don't pass the bar exam the first time or even the second time, and implementing structures, implementing programs that are geared towards younger students, because by the time we're talking law school, it's too late. And so those are the things that the Council on Access and Fairness would look into and address. But also, as the president of the Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association, I have direct access to all of our law students, and it is very intentional on our part to let law students know that we have a Black Bar Association, that we are here to provide mentorship and to provide opportunities to help you with job searches and placements. We have wonderful Black attorneys and judges. I put on programs and do all sorts of things to connect our students with resources. And that has really been propelled by my personal experiences that I had and the hurdles that I came across in this industry. We still have a long way to go, but I can tell you that through organizations like the Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association, which has been around since the 70s, we are plugging away at the work to make sure that people who look like me aren't the only people in the room. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is we have a deficit in even Black prosecutors across the nation. And it really does mean something to have impacted people at the table making decisions. As impacted groups, we should be the people who make decisions because we know what the problem is and we are well equipped and best equipped to offer the solutions. When you have an industry that is dominated by white men, you see the huge effect that it has on how cases are plea bargained out, who gets plea bargains, who gets prosecuted in the first place, how people get charged and what they are charged with. So just across the legal industry, there are so many reasons why we have to address the disparity in attorneys of color. It's not just the criminal legal system, but it's also in our family courts. It's also in other aspects of our civil legal system.
I have another question again.
Let me pause on that question really quickly, Milo, and bring up a major point that I think all of you unanimously touched on, is that there are some systematic oppressions and barriers in every single industry that you guys represent. I'll start with you, Milo. You talked about there are a lot of Black actors, Black creators in the industry, but the representation of what Black means in America via media is not always a positive one. Genevieve, you said that we are heavily represented on the other side of the fence. We're not at the table when we get in these spaces. Dr. Abdi talked about how he is a minority in his classroom, but over 30% of the individuals that he serves and has to connect with are individuals of color, and the way that he interacts with them intentionally brings about this change. And so we have a lot of these underlying systematic oppressions that we're talking about in this room, but some of us may not exactly know what all of those are. So I'm going to implore you all, my panelists, to really call them out. And Genevieve did a great job of it, that when you got a judge in a field that is dominated by white men, the actions and decisions that come out don't necessarily benefit people of color. Tyrone talked about the fact that he had to overcome being taken seriously, right? That this industry and how he had to be strategic about bringing his business about was strategic in the fact to garnish that respect in his industry. So I just implore us to take a moment to really soak that in and to acknowledge what those barriers may be, because I know our students in this room foresee and have those same barriers and opportunities in their classes, in their spaces as they're growing as professionals. Milo, I will allow, please ask that question, and then I'm also going to briefly switch gears because our last panelist has finally joined us, and I know we want to hear from him as well. So Milo, please, I'll try and spotlight it again.
So, Genevieve, just to share a quick anecdote to frame this, it's a very personal question, but it's one that I have my own methodology of dealing with. One of my primary investors and one of the guys who sits on my board of directors, to whom I go for any business related insight, a person of incredible success. He's actually a Kenyan national, an African man. I don't play golf, but there's a bunch of guys on my board that do, and they're always inviting me to go. So I'll go and just kind of like sit in the cart and drink a seltzer and just watch them swing the clubs around. I just talk to people. And we had this experience one time at the golf club where both he and I were sitting in the golf cart. Whether he is a good golfer or not, I couldn't even tell you. I don't care for the game. But he was approached by a couple of the people while he was sitting in the cart, and I was nearby and was asked to step out of the cart because they were assuming that he wasn't a paying patron on the golf course, but that he was maybe like a caddy, I suppose, or maybe like a member of staff that wouldn't necessarily have been, because it was a very, very white establishment. So I got into a conversation with him about what is the psychology behind dealing with people approaching you because they feel like you're out of place just because of the color of your skin. And it was very insightful to hear from a man's perspective and also from a foreign national's perspective. Here's a particularly blunt and direct way of dealing with it. But then also as well, I think, from figures in the community that are high net worth, that changes the way that they approach situations anyway. But I'm really, really interested to hear about what is the psychology I'm dealing with. As you mentioned, there have been cases where you've stood in a courtroom and a judge is addressing, like, I guess, ostensibly somebody who's your inferior because they refuse to believe that a Black woman could be there representing a client from a legal standpoint. What is the psychology behind overcoming the immense amount of rage that must instill in you? Like, where do you go to and what do you do to come to that place?
Well, I am a firm believer in the need for us to acknowledge the racist history and the effects of racism and white supremacy in America. And with that understanding of the need to acknowledge that very thing, I have built within myself a very strong self-confidence that is undergirded by my faith. And for me, in those moments, I go to my daily affirmations. And I know this may sound very, very cliche, but I go into my daily affirmations because as a person who is dealing with the work of dismantling white supremacy and systemic and structural racism every single day, it can take a toll on you. So in those moments, I remind myself that I was created with a purpose, that I am here for a reason, and that I am here and I belong here. And so with those affirmations, I then begin to speak the absolute truth. And without being apologetic, I say it very loudly and I say it very clearly. And I've had to learn to do that over the years. And now it just comes naturally. But when you get into those situations, especially early on, that rage that you referenced can be something that is a very real emotion for you in those situations, because we have to understand that these systems that we are dealing with are deeply embedded with this idea that Black people are subhuman. So these systems dehumanize us at every turn. And so just affirming my humanity, affirming the humanity of my clients, those are the things that I carry with me and I make sure that I do when confronted with those situations. Thank you for that question.
Thank you for sharing. Again, it's difficult to know how to frame those kind of questions, but one of the things that I'm experiencing in my journey as a person of color and that I have witnessed in my friends and peers is having coping strategies for injustice that just inspire rage, just sheer rage. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, Milo. As promised, we do have our last panelist who was able to join us. So I'm going to shift gears just a bit and go ahead and spotlight his video, as well as give him the opportunity to introduce himself. Please tell us your industry, Brian, a little bit about yourself and an obstacle that you may have faced in your industry.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? I'm Brian Ware with Best Way Construction Services. First off, I'm just honored to be here, honored to be in the room. Some of you folks like Genevieve, I've seen on Facebook that have really done a lot of great work in the community. So I'm honored to be in the same room with a lot of our panelists here today. So my background is engineering. I'm an engineer from San Diego State University, former basketball player as well. When I was there, and I went on to go into construction management for the past 15 years. I started my business, Best Way Construction Services, in 2014 as a construction manager. I'll be getting my contracting license later this year. I also do design and permit management as well. The biggest obstacle, I think, when you think of construction, it's very much an old boys network, and I've often been the only Black, manager, employee in the whole company, in the field, in the office. So trying to, get over that obstacle and, being a young man in the industry, getting over that too, a little bit of ageism as well involved in that as well. But, just pushing through. So just kind of getting over the hump, and like a lot of our panelists, I think, have alluded to, we need more representation. So, I've always taken it as a challenge to, step up and be a representative for my community, and, to kind of be that next one to lead the torch and things like that. So that's me and my business. I put my info in LinkedIn if anybody ever wants to connect. These are always great opportunities to connect with like-minded people as well.
Thank you so much for that introduction and information. I'm going to stay with you just for a moment. And you talked about this a little bit, that one of our students typed in a question earlier and said, I was always fearful to speak in class, for fear of being wrong, not just because I was afraid of being wrong, but I didn't want to feel those negative about being young, Black, and dumb. And these are often occupied all of our see. You talked about being generally the only one in the room, branching off to build your own business because of that. How do you counteract those feelings, and what are some tools that you can give to students to help them navigate that as well?
I'm trying to think which way to come about this. For me, I think I know the term lately I hear like is imposter syndrome, right? And it happens, I think growing up, it wasn't that. It was just called confidence, right? So, I think you can reinforce your confidence first and foremost by just education, right? I think if we look at history and where we've come as Black folks, the ability to educate ourselves and read, right, and start from there is the most important thing. So, even as you grow into your professional, you always should be learning, right? So if you don't feel comfortable, ask a question, right? How do you learn? You ask. So, don't be afraid to speak up and look at yourself as unique, right? I think we're realizing it more and more now that being black and being one of the only ones is a unique perspective that you can offer, right? And the way you look at the world is very unique, and the black mind right now is very valuable in what we can offer. I think all the other resources and the other cultures have been tapped, right? But there's still a lot of knowledge and opportunity you starting to see to pour into the Black communities and Black businesses and X, Y, and Z. So, just keep educating yourself and just remember where you came from, right? The fact that you're there, right, and in college and you're taking the step forward to better yourself and improve your situation, your next generation situation. You might be the first one in your family. Use those as confidence builders. You know what I mean? You're unique in that sense, and you're valuable. The fact that you're there and you have a presence. So that's how I take it. And that would be my advice there. Don't forget who you are or who you want to be and what you're trying to build.
That is great advice. Don't forget who you are. Tyrone, I'm going to pass this question on to you now. Same preference. How do we get over some of this imposter syndrome? Particularly how did you start a business with just $100, beating all of the odds? How do we crawl up out of that hump? Tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, first, it was just me having a motivation to be my own boss and stepping out of the educational part of the business and seeing if I could, do things myself. And I've always been a confident guy when everything is on my shoulders. Far as the classroom, I always isolated myself where it was just me and a professor in the room, even though it may have been 75 people in the room. It's like I needed to know that it didn't matter what other people think. And just like me starting my business, it didn't matter what other people think. I had the confidence, and my motivation was to show myself. My competition is always myself. To this day, a lot of people may come into the restaurant saying, well, I'm saying if you're better than Coops or better than Fields or better than this barbecue place. That's not my competition. My competition has always been myself. And that's always my focus is how can I compete against myself and be better than I was yesterday. So in taking $100 and starting a business, it was like, first you had to give things away for free so people can taste test and all this. And then we had our first job in the backyard where it was a catering gig, and we took all those proceeds, flipped those over into another thing. And then I started touching into the people who I've already come across as far as business owners. And a lot of people start businesses and don't realize you can start in a church with your business, because the church is the community. They're from all over the community with all type of titles. So that's what we did. We tapped into different churches around San Diego, and that's how we really built our business really quickly, because once they have an event at the church and then people taste your food, oh, we need your number. And then that's when we start kind of pouring back into the business, buying cards and all that stuff. So it was a pretty simple idea that I had, but it was extremely hard. Don't take just because it was $100 that it was easy. We just had the confidence in ourselves, and I knew the motivation was for me to compete against myself. And I'm a competitive person and always want to win, even though I don't all the time. But I know I learn from my mistakes and I grow from that.
Dr. Abdi, thank you for that, Tyrone. Dr. Abdi, I'm going to pass this to you, particularly as you're still in your studies. Do you ever feel like you have this imposter syndrome, and how do you counteract those feelings?
Yeah, imposter syndrome is, I think it's a pretty common thing that a lot of us don't, we think it's limited to us alone, but I think a lot of people really experience this. And I think it's really universal, right? But sometimes, you associate it with being a minority, you associate it with yourself because of how much society has rejected you and so on. I recall story when I first went to the Caribbean to study medicine, and I started with the pre-med classes, and I used to sit at the back all the time, right? And I initially came late I started my first semester late. I was like 2 weeks late, and I had a particular assistant professor who would call me out, ask me questions, and she knows I started late, but she would ask me questions. And initially, I didn't know how to respond to some of the questions because I was late to the semester, and she would make fun of the way I talk, I respond, and she would ask me questions like, "What do I rap?" and so on. So I'm Black, I'm sitting at the back. She's throwing all these stereotypes, and she would say things like, "Oh, well, you know what? I'm gonna appoint somebody to help you out with this, right?" Because she's automatically throwing out all these stereotypes, and I took that with the chin, and I went hard on my studies, and prior to that semester finishing, I actually had the highest in that class. And fast forward a year later, that same professor, now I started in medical school, and I'm a second year, I'm an MS2, and she figures out that I'm actually scoring really well at the top of my class in some of the classes. And at that time, I'm studying for board exams, the United States Medical Licensing exam, and so on. And she hasn't taken those exams, so she comes and asks me how to study for those exams, right? And it's crazy because initially she started off with, you know, these prejudices, and then later on she started asking questions of how from her previous student how to study. So you just have to realize, you know, it's okay to feel out of place initially. It's okay to feel that. I'm a second year resident right now, but as a first year resident, when you step into the real world of actually working, you come from medical school and then you step into the real world, everything's different, right? Because initially it's just books, and now or things you learn in books, and now it's real life. You have to make diagnoses, you have to see a patient, assess them, and so on. So everything is different. You feel like you're starting back at the basics, back at square one. That's how you really feel in your first year of medical of residency, and that's how it was for me. And but what I realized is it was not just me feeling that way. If you really, a lot of people don't share these feelings, but a lot of the people that I was working with actually felt out of place, felt like, you know, that same imposter syndrome we're describing. So at some point, you just have to embrace it and say, you know what, I don't know this, but I'm gonna learn it. You know, you're here, you're in this place, you're hired here, you're brought here because of some qualifications you met, and know that, you know, you're here because you're qualified, nothing else. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that.
Thank you for that. And I think Brian also put that in the chat. Confidence is key, right? And you talked about that. You're here, occupy that space, be you to the fullest, no matter what. Genevieve, I'm going to toss this back to you just a bit. You talked a bit about, and I apologize for my background, guys. You talked a bit about encountering that rage and what that may look like in your spaces, and kind of moving past and being microaggressed and being told that you were not seeked for the answers. How do you kind of counteract what may present itself as imposter syndrome in your field?
I would definitely echo what we just heard from my esteemed panelists. I think that we have to recognize that everyone feels that way in a certain sense at some point in their lives. And so recognizing that that's a very real thing is also very important to defeating that feeling of being an imposter. And then also just going back to really believing for yourself and knowing for yourself that you do belong there. You got there some kind of way. And so because you are there, you belong there, and there's nothing anyone can say or do to change that fact. And we have to really treat the fact that we are still here as a fact. And I think that that is something that we just have to embrace. I also think that we have to embrace making mistakes. It is only a mistake if we don't learn from that particular failed decision or quote unquote failure. Mistakes become victories when we translate them into lessons learned. And so the fact that you may answer a question wrong doesn't matter. It doesn't devalue your existence. It doesn't take away your worth. It doesn't mean you're not meant to be there. I was the first person in my family to go to college. And I remember being on the plane. And, this was back in the day where people could actually watch your plane fly off. And my little sister was at the window and I could still see her. And I just started crying because I was on my way to do a year-long study abroad program in Mexico City. And I started to have that feeling of, who do I think I am? I remembered saying that to myself and crying. Who do you think you are to go and study in Mexico City for a year? You're from Southeast San Diego, and to recognize that those feelings are very real, but to affirm in yourself, know your worth, remind yourself of that, and always go back to the divine, because we didn't create ourselves, but we were created by the divine for a divine purpose. And so you have to stand in that recognition of your divine purpose, no matter where you are.
Sasha, your mic is off, but just to snake in, Genevieve, it seems like you have an incredible capacity for meshing faith and a higher understanding with what is ultimately what seems to be like a very kind of hardline and logic-based industry. Like I think there's a beauty in that if people aren't picking up, I would love to highlight, because I think a lot of the time, to speak to your point, people become involved in an industry that sometimes necessarily they don't feel like they should even have a place in. So they're constantly trying to read what the guidelines are in order to fit in better. It seems like what you've been able to do is employ, a modicum of spirituality and faith in a very kind of like logical and incisive career. You're doing it your own way. And also, as well, to Brian's point, that's because confidence is key. Like, I think that what I see in a lot of young Black people is I'm trying to figure out exactly where they fit in a construct and not recognizing their excellence. And one of the things I've always seen in the African-American people is the ability to, not just if life gives you lemons, make lemonade, but, grow a whole, whatever a lemon orchard is, you know what I mean? Really flip the thing on its head. So I think the confidence that Brian's talking about and the ability to form your career into whatever you want it to be. You guys have made like incredibly insightful points about learning that the most important part of the thing is make it what you want it to be, boldly and confidently. Like, that's really good to hear from you guys. And from you as well, Tyron. I'm not overlooking what you're saying. It's just Genevieve's point, appealed to me because it was the most recent. I have very limited bandwidth. I can't remember a lot. I'm sorry.
No worries. And thank you for that. I want to shift gears a little bit and ask my circle, what role did mentorship play in your career, in your trajectory, and how do you feel like students can benefit?
Great question. You broke up a little bit. Was that a question to me? I'm so sorry, Sasha.
Yes, it was. What role does mentorship play in yours? Yes, that was for you, Milo.
Everything. Belief. If confidence is key, like Brian is saying, and making the career your own, like Ty and Genevieve were saying, is key. Everything. There are people on this call right now that I've known since the day I moved to San Diego who have been, whether they do or do not know it, I tend to think that they do now, who've been instrumental in me just being able to frankly just say, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to do it exactly as I want to do it. And I'm unconcerned with what your perception of how I'm doing it is, what your opinion of if I even should be doing it is. Finding, and this is something for me, like that I'll share now, finding solid role models, peers, people that I can look into for advice and guidance has been difficult for me because I have that horrible thing where I don't suffer fools gladly. Like, it takes me a long time to get to listen to somebody, and I like to see them mess up a little bit, and I like to know that they're human. I don't I don't search for these kind of like God level entities that have done it all right and then tell me how to do it. And I'm like, wow, you're so special. I like to see people mess it up a little bit. That's where I to Genevieve's point earlier on, I believe that there are wins and learns, and that's something that I learned relative to San Diego City College as well as an athlete, which I was at San Diego City College. Go Knights. So I think the having those people is vitally important. I think a bigger and more difficult question is, how do you select them? And I think that, the easy response to that is, it's the people who do the most for you, which then leads me to this question: is, are people prepared to look at who's doing the most for you? So I'm going to kind of like work my way back to where I'm at. Is those kinds of people are like infinitely invaluable, and they are. What you have to do is listen very carefully and watch what people are doing for you. Because 9 times out of 10, the people who like pop up on you and will be like, hey, I'm going to do something for you right now, are not doing it for the right reasons at all. But the people that are just quietly improving your standard of living, even though you don't notice it, are gold dust. They're just, and so, like I say, there are people on this call that have been those people for me. And at points in time, I wasn't tuned in enough to be able to listen and see and be like, wow, that is a huge step that person took for me. So I say all that to say this: those types of people are extremely important. We have to do the best job that we can of being quiet and watching and listening and seeing who those people are who are selflessly providing for us, because they're the key people, and that's who we pick. And directly, some of the people that I met when I was at San Diego City College, and some of the people that I met before I graduated from SMU as well, have been so instrumental quietly in defining how I have chosen to present myself in life, that it's almost like I didn't notice until I came to a place where I could look back and say, my entire psychology surrounding this particular thing is taken directly from somebody who was quietly facilitating incredible opportunities for me. So we have to be quiet. I think we have to look and listen, and not listen to the chit chat of who's doing what for us, but just be quiet and look and listen and see who's really going out of their way quietly without any need or sense of reward. Altruism is extremely rare, but when it's present, it's very loud. But yeah, to answer your question, super important. Everything to me.
I'll follow up on that real quick if it's okay. Internships and mentorships are very important. It's a way to obviously get yourself out there, learn if an industry or a company is right for you, right? There's a lot of different opportunities even within your industry, right? I'm sure as an attorney, you can go defense, you can go prosecutor, you can go a lot of different ways. In construction, you can go for a general contractor, a subcontractor, a construction manager. So it's a great way to, a lot of times, sometimes get paid to, learn what you really want to do. And along the way, you'll find mentors and things like that. So I suggest, joining your local associations like your NSBEs, National Society of Black Engineers, your Earl B. Gilliams, your Black attorney, Black accountants, different groups like that. So, that's definitely a key to building that confidence and building just kind of that awareness of where you want to be. So it's very important. And I suggest just starting with opportunities like this and kind of reaching out and joining organizations and just putting yourself out there. I think, if you sum it up in a lot of these answers, just keep putting yourself out there, keep believing in yourself. And, these organizations, your churches, your family, your friends are all the support system, all the confidence builders. These are all the things that pour into you that allow you to go out in the world and execute.
And I wanted to highlight a question that it came through in the chat in regards to that. And what key skills? I'm hearing listening. I'm hearing joining networks. I'm hearing being an active participant. But what are some key skills that you felt, and anyone can jump in here, that you've learned along your journey, and that you wish that you kind of enacted sooner?
I'll keep going real quick. I mean, it's not one key thing. Like, no one is the same and no one is perfect, right? So there's nothing that I felt like I
I should have known, because really at the end of the day, it's experience. You know, you can't teach experience. You have to go through life. You have to understand what you like and what you don't like, right? So I think it all comes back around to confidence, right? Just believing in yourself that you belong, right? That you put in the work, you know. And if you guys play sports or not, a lot of us come from that type of background where we practice, right? And you got better when you practiced, and you saw the results of that. So just keep searching for it. Read books, write books, keep educating yourself. But personally, it's not one skill set beside just, we're all different, but I think we all have the same thing, is confidence, belief in ourselves, right? And we all found it through different ways. Genevieve found it through the church, right? I found it through, sports and my family, right? And you just have to find where you can tap into that. But I don't think it's personally it's not one key skill. It's just the confidence is really the biggest thing, and really experience. I mean, a lot of things you don't know until you go through it, right? A lot of people can tell you, but until you personally have that experience and find out how it relates to you, that's your path.
Any other final thoughts from our panelists?
With me, I'm sorry. With me, I find it that it's communication. You have to be able to communicate with whoever you come across, and whatever, because being in the community, you have people from all walks of life. So I have to be able to communicate with everyone. I have to be educated in what I'm telling them, so they get a complete understanding of what we're doing. We're not just food. We're here, much like Genevieve, to pour our faith into the community, and just show people that it's more love out there than hate, because we've been taught extreme hate over this past year and what it looks like. And, we have to show that people, love is much stronger than that, and your faith is much stronger than that in growing. And so we communicate that to everyone that we come across, and we want to be an example of what love looks like, not just with our food, but with our actions.
Put that on a t-shirt. We want to be an example of what love looks like, not just with our food. Yeah.
And I would say your finances too, though. I think that's a big component. Like, as you get more serious about where you want to grow and be, it'll kind of help you manifest kind of where you want to be. Not saying money is everything, but just understanding how it works and how to put yourself in a position to grow. That's what our goal is, right? We go to college to grow, get a job to grow your income. So be aware and take your finances serious, and how money moves, how to invest, how to grow, because there's a lot of people we all know that work their whole lives, but they maybe necessarily didn't take their finances as serious or understand how they could have leveraged their opportunities to get to the next level financially. That's another kind of, I know we all kind of get scared when we talk about money, and we got to go pay our taxes and we got to go do this. But if you're in business, I'm sure my brother Tyrone can, that's important to understand how you do your taxes and get a business loan. You can leverage that to grow your business, to hire people, to scale, to buy an investment property and do those things. And that's really important too, for us getting to the next level as Black folks.
To that point as well, Brian, which is key information. I have a question that came in a DM from Vikita. I spoke earlier on about when you're starting a business, or you have an idea, when you make your first dollar, what you should do with it. Vikita's question was, what should one do with the first dollar earned? This is going to be interesting. I just want to open this out to all of the business owners here to get a professional opinion. In my opinion, nothing. Because there is it's extremely exciting once you start a business and you recognize that you're being paid to do something that you're passionate about, hopefully, unless you started a business that you're not passionate about, in which case, reconsider. But if you started a business that you're passionate about and you realize that you're getting paid to do something that you love, there's an excitement that sweeps in, and you're like, this is it. This is what wealthy feels like. All I do is what I love. Okay. And so I can just live hand to mouth, and that's fine. One of the things that Brian was talking about was building buying power in your company, having a financial reserve, savings, if you will. So that first dollar that you get, take a good hard look at it and say, this is incredible. You see it on businesses all the time. The first dollar that they made, they'll put it in a frame and keep it on the wall. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is grow accustomed to the idea that if you're working in a business space that you've created, you now want for nothing. So people who go out and, and they spend money on like crazy lavish stuff, I don't know, red bottoms and Gucci belts or whatever. They do that, largely speaking, unless they're of incredible financial affluence, to satisfy the fact that the majority of their life is absorbed by something they don't want to do, right? Most of the people who have car payments they can't afford, it's because they have to spend like 3 hours in the car a day driving to a job that they don't want to do. Or they go out and they spend $1,000 at the bar on the weekend to wipe away the fact that they're involved in an area of work that they don't want to be involved in. For you, if you found a business that you're truly passionate about, there's no need for you to engage in that kind of spending. So for that first dollar, don't do anything with it. Add another one to it. Add, 998 more to it. Make it $1,000 before you even remember it's there, because you're doing what you love every single day. So there's no need to spend into a space where to spend into debt or to spend into anything that's not an asset for you, because you're doing what you love day to day. And when it comes to a point where you feel that sense of burnout, where you're like, I'm losing my love for this thing, cool. Then maybe splurge a little with that finance. Then maybe go on vacation. Then maybe, spend it on a learning experience or on somebody you love or something like that. And you'll find that you're leaking finance a lot less because you're more goal oriented. Play broke, even if you feel rich. Play broke. Don't touch any of those dollars until you need them for your own health. And I mean that in like every single way. And eventually you'll find that the company that you're operating has a ton of buying power, because you're not thinking about it. You're just building and building and building. You'll be hiring 10 new people, so you have more time on your hands to start your next business, or you'll be opening your new location, or you'll be being able to make investments in people who are in similar spaces and be crucial advisors to them because you've learned through, some of the mistakes that they could make. But to answer the question, what do you do with the first dollar? Nothing. Keep working. Don't touch it. Put it where it's safe, whatever that is, wherever that is, and keep working and keep loving every minute of it. Don't do anything with it. And I hope, Vicky, I hope that made sense. And then question. Oh, no.
Yeah, we're losing your sound a bit.
The question about manifestation. I love Genevieve's response to that. I want to take a more a kind of more, I guess, visceral approach to that. This is not the correct terminology, but I'm just going to use it anyway. I toxify every single person I know with regard to what my intention is. So they create accountability for me. I leech it into everybody. Like if there's a thing, it's like, next year we're going to open another office in Mission Valley. I'm like, we're doing it. Everybody, we're doing it. So everybody's constantly then creating a pressure system for me, whereby I'm living in the reality that I just have to do it. There's no way out. Like, how's the office going? Did you get the employees? What new projects are you going to take on? And I get that from like 10 different phone calls a day. And so in terms of like a very visceral boots on the ground version of manifestation, I'm constantly bullying everybody into bullying me to do stuff, creating intention and creating, a space whereby I have to be beholden to what people are asking me to do because of what I told them that I'm going to do. And it's the simplest way. And I think that for vision boards, that's the same thing. It creates conversation for you with other people. That means that they hold you accountable for the dreams you say you have. And the cool thing about that is they can be lovers, they can be haters. It doesn't matter. If they love you, they'll do it for all the right reasons. If they hate you, they'll still be like, so what's up with your office? Not making it, huh? Not looking so good for you, bro. Okay, I hear you. You just be quiet. I'll come back. You see me? So huge question there. And then after this, I'm going to shut up, I promise. But it'd be really good, like, as I'm just kind of like looking at the people who are checking into this conversation, I'm going to throw the link for the Support Black-Owned Businesses vintage sale back in the conversation here. It'd be really, really great at social distance without shaking hands, wearing masks, to actually meet some of you people in person and talk a little bit more, and enjoy some food and enjoy some fashion and get to speak to some people who've created success in person. So I'm throw that in the chat right now. But really great questions, really great insight. This is cool. I feel like I'm back in school right now. I learned so much this morning already. So really great.
Thank you so much for that. At this time, I did put in the chat, students, if you have any questions, make sure to unmute yourself. Feel free. This is your space as much as it is ours. We did have a couple, the one question from Jonah about how to manifest or envision your dream ahead of time, and we did see some answers from our panelists on that. But if there are any other questions, then we'll go ahead and invite that. If there is not, I wanted to pass it back to Dr. Abdi for his last question before he has to leave us at this time, talking about the mass disproportion of COVID-19 and the effects that we see in our communities. What are some things that we can do to remain healthy and safe? What are some aspects that we can share with our students moving forward in relation to this pandemic?
Yeah, so we all are aware of how COVID-19 specifically impacted the Black community, and there's a lot of awareness being raised in a lot of different platforms. And the vaccine coming out, there's a lot of misinformation in regards to that. So there's a lot of different things to tackle really when it comes to COVID-19 misinformation in the Black community. Me personally, like I said earlier, the community I live in, a good 30% of the people are Black, especially in my clinic and so on. So a lot of them do actually have skepticism when it comes to the vaccine and so on. And they personally asked me, and asked me my thoughts on, whether I took the vaccine, whether they should take it. And personally, it's just about kind of breaking it down to them and making sure they're fully aware of the studies and what the science shows of the vaccine. Not everybody is a scientist. Not everybody has access to read these papers. So that's kind of my role when it comes to that. And on top of that as well, just like, making sure you're not exposing yourself. We all know this. We all know everything too with COVID and how to protect ourselves at this point. But really tackling the misinformation, that's important among ourselves and trying to get reliable information from the internet and the places we have access to. Just yesterday, I was in a long conversation with somebody, a relative of mine, and they were trying to convince me to tell somebody, another relative of mine that's actually pretty older, 80 years old, to not take the COVID vaccine, And I had a long conversation with this individual and was trying to tell them about the science behind the studies and so on. So it's certainly a lot of work, but yeah, the goal for us should be to get in touch with the actual true information in regards to this, despite the amount of prior injustices that happened in medicine. Despite all that, that's kind of my take on that.
Thank you so much. And I do know that Dr. Abdi and Genevieve do have to leave us at this time. If you have a moment, please share your last piece of advice for students growing in your field. You do have to excuse yourself for a meeting. We completely understand, but I'll tailor the floor to you two at this time and then kick that off to the rest of our panelists.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dr. Abdi. I didn't want to drop off without just saying bye. Thank you all for being here and for being yourselves, and just embrace who you are, every part of you, every single part of you. Embrace that, bring that with you always. But thank you so much, Dr. Abdi. I give you the floor. Thank you so very much to all my panelists. Thank you. Thank you for who you are and what you do.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. Really insightful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, what I would add is as far as the students goes, like what we were talking about earlier was like mentorship and so on. I think that's such an important thing with anything you're trying to do in life, right? You come to this world not knowing anything, and you gather information slowly, and you mostly gather it from the people around you, and then other resources, the internet, books, and so on. So the main important thing as a student that you should always know is the amount of information you have is so small. and you don't want to ever feel like you have enough. And once you get that feeling, you're going to start closing off doors that could have been potentially making a lot of things easy for you. So really, it's important to understand that, you know, mentorship is such an important thing with every step. A person in a class ahead of you, a person in the same class of you, it can be, you know, a professor, a colleague, whatever it is. That's the most important thing, especially when it comes to studying. When it comes to you know, what resources do you use? What college are you trying to apply to? What are you trying to do in life? And that would be the best guide. As much mentorships as you can have, I think it's the best thing. It personally helped me a lot with every step I went through in my studies over the past like 10 years and so on. It was people that really guided me more than anything else. So I think mentorship is one of the most important things that everybody should kind of have.
Thank you so much for that. We thank you for your time, Dr. Apti. We know you have another meeting to step off to. So thank you again for joining us today. I will be sharing your contact information as well as the recording to all students who would like to connect. To the rest of our panelists, same question. Last final words and growing advice for individuals growing in your field for our young and budding professionals.
I have just been reminded. I was just texting my business partner about what's happening here because it's very enjoyable and a huge learning experience. And I've just been reminded that since the start of the year, we've actually been operating an internship program. I don't know what's going on ever. And apparently, with relation to that, I should put the company email in the chat and ask for people who are looking for internship positions in media, entertainment, advertising, and marketing to send their resumes to whatever email address they send me in a minute that I can't remember what it is. But I'm sorry, I'm not answering the question. I know that we are offering internships here in the city of San Diego and Los Angeles as well, related to media and entertainment. Those kinds of fields would be, you know, like data and data scientist, brand and marketing recognition, content creator, network marketing. If you feel like you have a voice in the creative space and something to show and demonstrate there, beautiful. If you feel like you have a handle on human behavior and the metrics of human interaction, please reach out. Okay, here it goes. Cool. It's this. I'm so sorry. The email address, sorry, Vikita. I was just in a DM chat with Vikita. So now she has the correct email, but nobody else. But please feel free to send over your resumes. And also, just to paint this picture for you, it's not just resumes, it's websites, Instagrams, whatever you feel is a demonstration of what you're capable of, send it over. You know, in the creative side of the business, we see 1,000 resumes that are just like pieces of paper with words on them. There are people who are like, I'm a super creative individual. And it's like, so please feel free to reach out. And now, for the third time, what was the question, Sasha? Sorry.
No worries. Final words in growing, advice for growing professionals in your field.
If you want to be successful in your field, don't be shy about learning it from a humanitarian perspective. I think that where a lot of people mess up is, you know, I'll tell you this, one of the number one, I can't remember right now, you're probably starting to pick up a chronically bad memory, but I can't remember specifically one thing that I learned in class in any of the schools that I went to, but I can tell you what the overriding theme of the piece was. And that is like, get your assignments done, you know, whether you're sick, hungover, or it's the weekend, you know, learn to get along with people and you know, don't create adversity in your personal network. These are like the universal lessons that we learn from academia and from institutions that are true to any industry that you work in. So I say that to say this is, as much as it's important to learn the field of work that you're in, learn the type of people that are involved in that work too. Learn to learn people, learn to understand people. because it will bring you a lot more joy, whether you do or do not enjoy your career. And if you do enjoy your career and you find that that's, and hopefully that's for everybody here, and you find success, it's the thing that will take you to the next level. It's the thing that will foster your ability as a leader, as a growth partner. It's the kind of thing that's recognized by companies. People like people who are invested in them. And if you're the kind of person who's invested in people and you know a little bit about kind of everyone, like not in a gossipy way, but like literally, if you're having conversations with people and getting to know them and who they are, why they are, what their motivators are, what their dreams and what their goals are, you are a gold mine, because you become the most important part of any business or career, because you're the person who knows people, and we can't do anything without a team that surrounds us. So that would be my number one thing. And then secondly, I am guilty of this too. We are far too afraid to take risks. Calculated risks, better, but we are far too afraid to take risks. It's, of course, important to calculate kind of what your losses are going to look like, from a network-based, emotional, financial perspective, all of these kinds of things. But the success of anything is predicated by risk. Leap, throw it, shoot it, hit it, swing for it, do whatever it is. But I can make it a sports analogy, shoot the shot, swing the bat, take the risk. As long as it's calculated and you know what the worst possible thing that can happen is, that's where the biggest margin for growth is. It really is. Now, I'm not advocating for you going out there and just being completely reckless with your time, energy, or finances. Make it a calculated risk, but accept that in the lineage of being exceptional, there's always risk. And if you don't take those risks, you'll often feel safe and you'll feel comfortable, and that's fine. That's beautiful. But if you perceive for even 1 microsecond in this moment right now that you are built for something bigger and built for something better, take your risk. Take your risk. See how it works out. That's all I got.
Mr. Tyrone,
Yes.
following Take Your Risk, what are what is the last final advice that you would give to a growing professional in your field?
I would just let everyone know to be educated in the field that you want to go in. Know the risks that you're going to be taking in those fields, because it's going to be a lot of risk, and it's going to be a lot of ups and downs in that. And be confident in it. My main thing with myself is to be confident in knowing my weaknesses, because if I know my weaknesses, I know what I have to work on. Anybody can, be confident in their strengths. I'm confident in knowing my weaknesses and building on that and working on my weaknesses, but also surrounding people who are strong in those areas around me. So in building a business, you have to have people, strong in your weaknesses around you. And being prepared as the leader or owner or, whatever you want to call yourself, is being prepared for the problems, because everything is not going to go as you plan it out in your business plan and everything. So it's being prepared for the problems, having a backup plan for backup plans, and being creative with all that you do, because just doing the same thing every day, if something may go wrong. So being creative and doing the same thing, but in a different way. So with our advertising and everything, we're advertising, but we're doing it in a different way of how we approach people, because we want a multitude of people to be able to come and enjoy our food, or be able to come here just to have a talk. I can't wait till we can start having customers sit in the store so we can be able to really interact. And that's the main thing. But the number one thing with me is my faith, and for the people, well, no matter what your faith is, but praying, our prayer, and just wait for those answers, and being patient and waiting for those answers.
Thank you so much for that. And Brian?
Yeah, so I think just, keep trying to move forward in your development, just stick with it. I went to the community college route as well. And, I just stuck with it, and it took me 6.5 years to graduate, but you know, it was what was needed for me in my time, you know, and so, you know, just stay on your path, stay determined, you know, and there's a path for you, believe it or not, in any industry you choose. You just have to go out and seek it, and you'll find out there's a lot of people that are seeking you, especially as a Black business owner. We're starting to see a lot now. And as I mentioned earlier, just be more on top of your finances. Definitely, you know, don't be a solopreneur, is advice I've gotten before. You know, find a good team, you know, find a good accountant, find a good lawyer. Maybe if you're not there yet, like just follow somebody, right? Like a Genevieve, and keep those contacts up, and reach out to people. Hey, I'm rolling with my business. Do you have a contact for this? And it's really important in construction, because, you know, you need to have bonding capability. You need to be able to show that you have a consistent track record, that you pay your bills on time. You know, if you need to take on a $500,000 project, and you need a line of credit to execute that, and they're ready to hand that job to you because you're a minority certified, you know, business, but you're not, you know, financially ready to take that on, you know, that could be a big miss. So definitely, you know, start to think about your team, do your research, like they said, on the risk in that industry, and, you know, especially in construction, like the type of capital, the type of reserves you need to have, and things like that. You know, those are all important as you get into, I would say, the world of construction, or even engineering and things like that. So yeah, just, you know, definitely, it's never too early to start networking and building your team and your contacts, and things like that. Even if you're not ready, I hate this so much with Black folks. We wait to the end. We think that everything has to be lined up perfectly for us to go out and figure it out, right? And you'll be surprised to see how many people, how many other business owners don't really necessarily have it. They're all figuring it out. We're all kind of impostering our way in some way or another, right?
For sure.
For sure, right? We all go through it. I don't feel worthy a lot of times, but at the same time, you know, I keep pushing through no matter what. I may have some doubts, but I keep pushing through. So yeah, just, it's never too early to think about where you want to be. And, you know, sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5 years till you really get where you wanted to, but just thinking about it is really the first step in doing this type of stuff, outreach, networking, and connecting with people.
Can I say something to that point? This is something that I share frequently whenever I'm involved in public speaking engagements. You want the best for yourself. You want a flourishing career or business. You want everything to be perfect. You don't want to release a piece of copy in case it has a spelling mistake. You don't want to release a video of you talking in case your makeup is weird or there's a dumpster in the background. Check this out. Nobody is going to give you the keys to their Ferrari unless you know how to drive. Go take your test. You're going to graze your rims on the curb. You might mess up because you did a sign wrong on the theory part of the test. First of all, learn how to drive. Then go out there, get yourself a modest vehicle. Maybe you're driving around in your parents' Oldsmobile. It's okay. You have a little fender bender, no problem. And then after that, you afford a bigger car payment, or maybe you get a lease. And then maybe a few years after that, you afford a car payment and you own the car. And you finally, and then a few years down the road, you're like Beamer, Benz, or Bentley. And then a few years after that, you got yourself a Ferrari. But what you didn't do is walk into a dealership and be like, I want a Ferrari, I deserve it. And then be like, okay, well, let's take a look at your driver's license. And you'd be like, oh yeah, I don't have one. You have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. So don't be oriented towards this idea of perfection and everything has to be perfect before I roll it out to the world. Just begin, because it's the biggest path of learning is the feedback. Now you got to be tough. You got to be tough because when the feedback comes in, you know, sometimes it can be a little abrasive. But to Brian's point, don't wait. Don't be behind closed doors waiting for this perfection so you can be like, look what I did. Just go. Like I say, if you want that Lambo, then you know you got to go get a driver's license before anything else. So we have to test ourselves. We have to work with test cases. We have to move through a process of growth. And here's one of the things I always say, specific as well to people in the media and entertainment industry, but in any business this is the case. We hear about this in media and entertainment all the time. getting a break, blowing up, right? Like I'm gonna drop my mixtape, I'm gonna blow up, or I'm gonna do this audition for this TV show, I'm gonna be on it, I'm gonna blow up. That's what's gonna happen. There's beautiful statement by Oprah Winfrey. You wouldn't believe how many nights it takes to make it overnight. While you're hustling and grinding to get to that big blow up moment, you're earning your first dollar. And then maybe the week after that, $10. And then maybe the week after that, 1,000. And then maybe at the end of the year, that was 100,000. And maybe you're looking for 1 million. And maybe 5 years later, you got 1 million. And then you keep on going. And then one day you're like Jeff Bezos and you got billions and billions of dollars. Okay. If those are your goals, it starts with the first dollar. It starts incrementally, right? So don't be, that speaks to the same point, right? Don't be locked into this idea of I have to create this perfect thing behind closed doors, then throw it open to the world and be like, okay, it's ready. Just begin. Because the key to your success is going to be your feedback. So begin, even if it looks a little ugly, even if you don't think you maybe learned enough, just begin. Don't be afraid. That's the first risk.
And with that, we will close it all as that is our students' call to action. Begin. We implore you to begin today, and the space is designed for you. I want to summarize some of the key points and those final advice from our industry leaders. Genevieve opened it up with saying, be true to yourself and be true to those that you are present to. Milo talked about don't go into an industry that you're not in love with. Make sure that you start off this pace when you begin doing something that you love and that's in alignment to your trueness, so that every day work doesn't feel like work and you fall in love even more with your passion. Dr. Abdi talked about, and as well as Brian, building that network. Make sure that you are well plugged in and connected to the individuals and like-minded people that can propel you forward. Tyrone talked about being true to yourself, as well as is seeking those opportunities. And Milo closed it out very well with us with number one, starting with the basics and knowing what you need to know and as a foundation to build whatever you're trying to do, as well as don't wait for perfection or for someone to find that success for you. Make sure that you're doing that incrementally and in steps so that you can move forward. Today we have recorded this feed, so we'll make sure to send that information out to all individuals on this line and to our campus community. I'll also be sharing all of our contact information for our esteemed panelists and guests. I thank you again for joining us. We had individuals from health services, construction, entrepreneurship, engineering, legal services, community activism, and so much more, as well as that. And those were just on the panelists. That's not all of our students in the room that are growing professionals in their industries as well. I am of no doubt that we have the world's next greatest leaders in this room. So I thank you again for spending your morning and your time with us. I will leave the room open for any questions again in the chat for any students or those that may want to connect and network. Again, all contact information will be shared shortly in an email as soon as the recording has furnished. I thank you all for your time, and we hope that you have a fantastic morning. Bye-bye, folks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Sasha.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, panel, also.
Look forward to hearing from you soon, okay? Take care.